should be good. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Getting this recorded, so you're good? All right. Thanks for coming. I'm Cherrie Nolden. Today the topic that I'm going to be talking about is selection for low input, naturally healthy, and locally adapted goats. So to give you an outline, I have a lot of information in a fairly long presentation because they gave me from 9:15 till 10:45 to talk to you guys. So if you're tired of hearing what I'm saying, feel free to get up and walk around. But anyway, the outline for today, we'll talk a little bit about our personal system on our own farm, definition of low input systems, nutrition, diseases, parasites, genetic selection, predator management, and then some resources that I've found to be really useful for our own goat production in an alternative manner that is generally it was not what I learned in my formal education. So I found things that work for me better than what the formal education has provided. So to give you a little bit about me as a background, I grew up on a hobby farm in Stoughton, Wisconsin. And then my grandmother had acreage in Kansas City. I got horses when I was a kid and showed all kinds of small animals plus horses in 4-H when I was a kid, but I didn't show goats or sheep or any of the small ruminants. So it wasn't until later that when I moved to Kansas that I got interested in goats, and I had sheep prior to that, but seeing and being among them in Kansas really gave me a different perspective on goats, because back then in the upper Midwest, I didn't feel like goats were as prevalent or valued as they are today. So I got a bachelor's degree in wildlife ecology, which as a kid in 4-H, I enjoyed nature space and things that were natural, and I liked the livestock production end of things, but I also liked natural resource stuff. So the wildlife ecology degree was in 2000. Then I bought a 10-acre farm in Stoughton, which was on clay soils, which when it's wet is really sloppy, and when it's dry is cracked and hard. So that is a bit of a challenge. Got sheep in 2001, livestock guard dogs to control the predators that were eating all my pastured poultry and protect the sheep. And then I did some wildlife ecology research in grassland birds, chronic wasting disease transmission to scavengers, scavengers of grassland birds or predators of grassland birds, and then wildlife disease prevalence, including Johne's disease. So before I really encountered Johne's disease, I was looking at its prevalence in the predator population that was about in our landscape. So I moved to Kansas and bought a 200-acre farm down there and worked for the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks and the Sedgwick County Conservation District, and worked on farm policy, farm bill programs, NRCS programs, water conservation, Ogallala aquifer issues, things like that. Then moved back to Wisconsin to Sauk County, which is sand. It was 200 feet of sand on that farm, so quite a difference from the clay and the loam of prior farms. And then moved up to where we are now in Dodgeville, Wisconsin, which is loam and a little bit of clay with dolomitic limestone underlay. So once I moved there, I was working on a master's degree in agroecology, finished that in 2019. And that project was looking at goats for brush control in oak savanna restoration. So I spent 3 years studying how we can apply goats for vegetation management and writing up a summary of the results from that. Then I pursued doctoral research under a ruminant nutritionist at UW-Madison, and was looking at using an egg-based antibody as a treatment for parasites in goats and cattle. So parasite challenges in both species that are in grazing systems, and using basically an organic form of treatment, but this was a patented process. I decided not to finish that doctoral research. The picture there of me in the lab with the goats was like 90 dairy goats that we got for the research and doing fecal egg counts and inoculating these goats with parasites and studying this egg-based antibody, and we did the same thing with cattle at the Arlington Research Station. But since then, I've been just a farmer on the 130 acres that we own in Dodgeville, and we rent another 100 acres. And I do education, I do kind of independent research, and I'm a grazing planner. I've been a Grassworks board member, which is an organization that focuses on teaching people how to be good grazers and apply livestock on the landscape well and be profitable, which is really important. And I'm on the NRCS State Technical Advisory Committee representing low input meat goats. So it's for Wisconsin. It's a different emphasis than the rest of the folks that are on the committee. So our farm system, we've had all different species of livestock. We're grass-based. We don't use chemicals. So we're not certified organic because I don't have markets for organic goat meat. I don't even sell goat meat directly. We sell all of ours at auction. But we raise Norwegian fjord horses, primarily goats, and then about 180 to 200 sheep, plus the 200 some goats that we have. So we bring in cattle, pigs, we have chickens, we have livestock guard dogs, but the cattle and the pigs are not as, we bring them in when we want that meat and raise them and put them in the freezer. Our farm layout, the red is the 50-acre home base farm, and then we bought another 80 acres of woods because we had goats. And we had the opportunity to turn basically degraded woodland into goat food and oak savanna restoration at the same time. So in 2018, that Google Earth image shows the 80-acre silvopasture that's surrounded in blue with all trees, and it was basically a junky, invasive filled woodland. And so we thinned it out, and by 2020, you can see the image on the right has much less tree cover, and we have 30 acres of that permanently fenced, and we actually set stock goats there instead of rotationally grazing. Whereas on the home farm, that red acreage area, we rotationally graze the animals there. So the sheep and the horses get rotationally grazed, but to control brush, although my master's degree research was using goats in a rotational system, I've been applying and studying the use of intentionally set stocked, not rotated goats in a silvopasture system to achieve the brush management goals that we have for that property, plus raise goats in a low input and profitable manner. So that's what we've been doing on the home farm. And then I also mentor people on using goats for brush control as a business. So there's lots of people that are making a really good living taking their herds to people's acreage and browsing the brush on those acres and getting $70,000 to $90,000 a year of income from a couple hundred goats that they move around the landscape. So at our farm, there's different things that happen by season. We don't have animals in barns. We don't kid in barns. They're all kidding out in the landscape. But in spring, generally we sell at auction, so we're marketing our goats when the goat prices are high, and that's in the spring, when supply is low and prices are high. So usually in spring, we're selling those kids that have finished late. By May and June, we're kidding again on the pasture, typically in the silvopasture. This year, we had some precocious bucklings and a failure of luteal lice. So we ended up with a bunch of bucklings that are kids born earlier in the season than we wanted. Farming, it's always throwing curveballs at you. But anyway, normally we're ideally kidding in May and June. And then we have bucks living with our stallions or our mares. Typically during the spring, they're with the stallions. And then at that time of year, we're also culling any bad mothers, getting rid of animals that aren't productive in our system. By summer, the does are in our silvopasture if they haven't been taken there already earlier in the spring. And like I said, we set stock them, which is really different. All of the recommendations these days are for rotational grazing. And we can do that because we've been selecting for parasite resistance, and we aren't concerned about them picking up loads of parasites on heavily infected ground. The bucks, we intentionally manage our bucks badly so that we can find out which ones are good. So they're pushed to eat all kinds of weeds in the winter sacrifice lots where we fed bales over winter, and those lots are loaded with parasites. So they're picking up parasites all year round, and if we don't have to deworm them, they stay. If we have to deworm them, they get culled. We make hay and baleage during the summer. We do forage testing on all of the lots. So we rent another 100 acres, which is basically 7 other farms that we rent for making hay and baleage. So hay for the horses and baleage for the goats and the sheep over winter. And then in the fall, we bring in the animals from the silvopasture. We sell any culls, like any blown out udders or does that didn't retain kids or didn't raise their kids, things like that. Bucks that failed over the summer, those get sold at that time. We will run them across the scale and identify individuals that we want to keep for breeding or assessing for breeding because they won't breed for a long time in our place. And then start with the meat sales. And again, at that time of year, the bucks are with the mare herd. So we have goats and sheep with the horses at different times of the year for vegetation management and for just picking up parasites and assessing those animals. And then in winter, we breed in mid-December, so we get the May kidding, but we'll split them up into groups and send them with their desired buck, our desired buck. They don't get much choice there. And then in mid-January, the does are recombined with a cleanup buck that we hope cleans up anybody who didn't get bred. We don't do any AI or ultrasounding or anything like that, so we're very low-tech in that regard. And start selling animals as they get to market size and the prices are coming up again out of the fall time. And so from a management perspective, we don't feed any grain. Everything on our farm is forage fed, besides the chickens. And if we have pigs, the pigs obviously get grain. But we don't deworm anything that we keep. If it needs to be dewormed, it gets dewormed, fed up so that it's fleshy again and sold at auction. We don't keep anything around that needs deworming. We do feed forage quality that's higher for the kids than the does or the bucks. We don't do any flushing, so no, we're trying to select for kidding for twins or triplets without flushing. So no nutritional energy increase to get them to ovulate more eggs, which is typically what people select for, what they do as a management approach to get more kids born. We don't have kidding jugs or any kind of related infrastructure or supplies. So there's no pens, there's no stalls. Our horses live outside all the time. We don't have horse training stuff. We don't have, the only thing that's really infrastructure is our handling system undercover, because we use that all winter, and always when we're using it during the summer, it's either blazing hot or raining. So it's really nice to have that undercover. We do have a 3-sided open barn, and we'll put straw bedding in there, but we feed all of our goats outside over winter. So they are outside in the snow eating, and often if they're in good body condition, they'll be like the sheep and they just bed down right in the snow near the feeders and hardly ever use the barn. Or we also have used some hoop shelters with bedding inside them, and they really don't use them much. As we've done better with our selection, I go out and identify the ones that are sleeping outside and usually don't keep offspring from the ones that are sleeping inside. In the summer, brush is the shelter. When the kids are born, we tag them, we weigh them, we count how many the doe had. We note any like color markings or identifications, so if they're unique, we can find them if they get lost or something out there, but just record everything we can about them. In the past, I used to do fecal counts a lot. I haven't done a lot of fecal counts. Obviously, for my doctoral research, I was doing a lot of fecal counts. FEMACHA is not something, we've done it in the past, but I haven't been doing it much lately. When they're set stocked in a silvopasture, it's hard to get your hands on them. It's not like you're rotating them every day to a new paddock. We do look at body condition changes. That's when I go out to the silvopasture and look over the herd, I'm looking at, okay, who's milking off too hard, who's maintaining good body condition, How fleshy are those kids? Are they staying that fleshy through their entire growth period? Are they declining during parts of that? Is the doe kicking them off too soon? Things like that. We look at udder quality, mothering ability, health issues, and all the does are ear tagged with fairly large ear tags. We've moved to bigger ones because some of our does are kind of skittish, so they don't want to let us super close to them, and I will scope them with binoculars to read their ear tags. Some of them are like running in the brush as I'm catching their kids to tag and weigh them. So that's how I get ear tag numbers recorded. And like I said before, if we have culls, we feed them up and send them on their way. So this is kind of what it looks like in spring. They're kidding in the brush, and we have livestock guard dogs out there. This is on the right is our silvopasture. It's really hilly, lots of ravines. You can't see more than, I don't know, maybe 2 acres of it at one time, just because of the hilliness aspect of it and the brush and the woods. But when we put goats into these areas, they're always eating up. Like, they don't want to eat the grass and the forbs that are near the ground. So this is great because they control the brush for us. In the summer, we have the winter lots where we've fed hay to all these goats and sheep over winter that are just caked with parasites. And that's where we put our young bucks and all of our older bucks. And we want them to be exposed to parasites without any treatment given, so that they tell us which ones don't need to be dewormed, and the ones that do, don't cut it for us. And then the does are typically out in kind of dense brush, eating that, and not eating any grain, very little grass in the system, so it's basically a low energy diet, high protein diet. And they're lactating and raising twins or triplets on that alone. They're not getting any supplements. No protein tubs, no molasses licks. They have mineral and water, salt, and brush. And then here's a picture of some of the bucks. We have a mix of Kiko, boar, Spanish, myotonic, Savannah. Our goats are basically mutts. Anything that can survive and has the traits that we want, we keep. And anything that doesn't, we don't keep. And so for us, it doesn't really matter what the breed is. We have bought registered animals, but we don't maintain the registration. We don't register anything out of them. And we also keep the bucks at our place for a neighboring farmer who raises goats and uses them for brush control, and we're basically testing the bucks that he's using too in our system to make sure that they're durable enough that they can go on to his herd and breed them and produce offspring that'll do well in brush control situations. Here's a mineral setup. We use these round bowl mineral feeders with Free Choice Enterprise buffet minerals, and so each of those round top rubber things have 6 different minerals in them. The pallet structure on the right is a dog feeding station for the livestock guard dogs. There's a hole in that the dog jumps through to get to their hopper of food. And then the silvopasture doesn't have electricity or water, so we haul water in a tote on the far left there with a little tank, low tank for gravity flow out of that for water for the animals. We have the bucks and rams living with the horses during the summer, and things like walnut trees in our pastures are part of the deworming program. The animals have access to this. They can eat it when they want. They don't have to eat it. They have plenty of other things to eat, but the ones that can manage their own selves are the ones that stay. In the fall, those late does and ewes are evaluated and put into winter quarters. Even when the brush is losing color and leaves, we're rotating through that. And then the bucks are typically in there on pretty lush forage during the fall, because the rotational system on the home farm has reduced the seeded head stems of the plants that seeded out earlier in that year, and the stuff that grows back in the fall is really flushy. This is typically what we can see with our brush applications. So a 1.5 acre paddock with 110 goats for 3 days takes it from what you see on the left to what you see on the right. I've done some research with SARE grants and various other granting organizations, and I was interested in studying what can we get away with for shelters for goats that are also portable, so I could take these out to the silvopasture. So I built double-deck and single-deck shelters that are hoop houses on boat trailers. Old used boat trailers are like $150 a piece with stock panels and silage plastic and some decking. And the goats, I thought, would really like that upper deck because goats like to climb things, and I put a ramp in the back or the front of this trailer near the hitch with slats that they could climb up to get to the second story. They apparently like caves, so they like the lower deck, and they like being close together. And very few of them actually use that upper deck. And it was mainly like kids that would go up there and play, but they didn't sleep up there. The shelters without the double deck that were just one single story but a taller space above their head, they didn't like that as well as they like the double deck one and that lower deck. So basically they like enclosed spaces with everybody really packed in close together. And so I studied density, and I studied the variables of the shelter options, and those reports are available on the SARE website. We also have this handling system that we've cobbled together from, I don't know, 6 different handling systems plus some like parts that we've engineered ourselves. And it's really useful to be able to run your animals through and weigh them whenever we want. And we hardly do any treatments of ours, so mainly what we use it for is weighing and inventorying what the herd is at that point. In the fall, again, that's when we typically are starting breeding. We bring them in off of the pasture, the silvopasture. We've had this buck here is one of the Kikos that I've bought in the past, and he was 260 pounds and not registered because the lady that we bought him from decided to stop registering her herd, and so I don't have any information about like his genetics or anything, but we did find out after about 7 years that he must have been highly inbred. He was very prepotent, and when we started breeding his offspring kind of back to related goats, we started having some inbreeding depression issues. So even though he himself was great and he produced great offspring himself, because of the inbreeding issues, we were struggling with fitness, reproduction, all kinds of health problems with them, but it was due to inbreeding. So that's something that I didn't really hear a whole lot about, but I think is important, and we do now have tools that can help us with that. And then in winter, we use these shelters. They co-graze with our stallions, our mares out in the snow. They're sharing hay. They have a little bit of shelter, but the best ones are the ones that don't use the shelter very much. And those are the goats that I like. We typically use collapsing bale feeders around our hay just to reduce the waste. And we've over time had some of the horses learn that they can just grab the hay and flip it all over the place. And if you think goats are wasteful, you add goats with horses that flip hay everywhere, and you can have a whole round bale disappear in 2 days' time. So, okay, let's go. I'll talk about low input. So what is low input, and why are we interested in that? I would define it as optimizing management and use of internal production inputs instead of buying things, minimizing the use of external products and inputs, and doing that wherever and whenever it's feasible on the farm. And then the reasons for that, me as a producer, I want to decrease my production costs from like feeding, maintaining the healthy goats, my time spent managing problems, treating individuals. I don't want to do a lot of stuff. I want the costs low. I want my risk lower. We always have price volatility out there, but by minimizing overhead costs, we can not be so concerned about the price volatility. And we also want to minimize the loss or morbidity of the animals that we have. We want to increase our short-term and our long-term profitability and sustainability of the system, the regenerative aspect of the farm. We want to improve our return on investment. And the alternative for a low input system would be reflected in what is typical in like a show goat situation or a hobby farm in terms of the level of management, the cost of inputs, the sourcing of the inputs, and the challenges involved with that. So for us, our view is that these alternative approaches can generate a lot of income. And they do that through reducing costs through high fecundity with our selection criteria. The twins are raised or triplets are raised. We have a low base herd to sale herd ratio, so we have more income from fewer number of does. And we want goats that thrive on our local forages. We don't want to have to buy grain. We're not grain farmers, so we don't want to buy the equipment to make grain and rent that land. We're making hay and baleage in the weather that Wisconsin throws at us, which means a lot of baleage and not a lot of dry hay. And so they need to thrive on that without supplemental energy or protein. So that's a big ask of a goat in a place like Wisconsin or the upper Midwest where goats typically are more of a desert species. But as the Kikos come from more wet climate, then they can do well up here. We want goats that are healthy, free from diseases, don't need deworming, don't need treatments for lice or mastitis or hoof rot or respiratory diseases, and we've found a way to do that. We don't do that with our herds, so it works. We want low labor. I don't want to be trimming hooves. I don't want to be assisting does with birthing. If they need assistance, we give them the assistance. If typically the kids need to be bottle fed, we sell them to somebody else to bottle feed them. We don't even raise bottle babies, and we won't buy bottle babies. They never stay in our system, even if we raise them ourselves. They're just not durable enough. They need to be maternal. They need to not have a need for doctoring, basically. They're out in the pasture. They're basically feral goats with a woven wire and high tensile electric top fence around them during the summer. And we send a dog in to round them up in the fall. And we want goats that are easy to market. So we don't want things that look like dairy goats that are being raised out there in the silvopasture. When they come in, they need to have gained a lot of weight and be fleshy that entire time that they came in from the silvopasture. We want a low-cost infrastructure for our handling facility. It's not fancy. We didn't go out and spend $20,000 on a handling system, but that's a really critical part of our system. And actually, the skid steer is probably the biggest expense in the system, but it's really critical, especially in winter, in delivering round bales out. But we only feed once a week. We only set round bales out once a week, put the collapsing bale feeders around them, and let the animals eat them. And we put out enough bales at once that all of the goats and sheep and horses can eat what they need over a week's time, and then the next week we go do the same thing again. So it's not an everyday thing. It's much more spread out. We can spend our time daily looking at the animals and deciding whether they are meeting our goals or not. Yeah.
How many head are you running?
So we have 200 goats and about 200 sheep now, and about 50 horses.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So they eat a lot of food. We were putting out, maybe 16 bales a week, round bales, for feeding all those different animals. Yeah. We need to increase income to generate profit. So we're reducing costs, increasing income, and that can be done through things that we aren't doing that we could, if we chose to do them, we could make even more money, like providing services. I provide guidance to people on how to use their goats for brush control. I don't go out and provide brush control as a service to other people. I set that up because my master's research was using goats for brush control, and I didn't want conflict of interest between a business interest and what I was doing research on. So I've just maintained that, and so I just help other people get their businesses going. But you can make a whole lot more money doing goats for brush control than you can for meat. And I don't know, I haven't been in the breeding and registered goat world, so I don't know how that compares to the brush control services. Agritourism is popular, goat yoga, things like that. People enjoy doing that sort of thing. We prefer to just like be on our farm, and we open the doors to the farm for people to come on particular days, but we like just having our farm to ourselves, so we're not an agritourism type setting, and the farm is kind of an escape from the rest of the world. Direct sales, there's lots of direct sales opportunities that we could be making more money on, but our choice for our outlet for marketing our goats is auction. And so generally I'm selecting goats that are what the buyers want. So the size, the fleshiness, the luster on their coat, all that has to be there for the buyers to pay the highest price, and the prices go all over the place. And because we have low input goats, we're not aiming for a boar goat fleshiness and mass. We'll never get that. It's incompatible with low input and brush management type applications of these goats. But we still are getting $3 to $4 a pound for our goats at auction for 60 to 70 pound kids. So we're not far off with what the buyers are looking for in terms of a fleshy animal for meat purposes. So how to achieve low input? Basically, you reduce disease susceptibility through increasing their health, avoiding diseases as much as you can, managing diseases, managing the conditions that the animals are in. Genetic selection, so you're finding the animals that work with the conditions that you have on your own farm, which Wisconsin and Minnesota are challenging, Iowa too, from a winter management perspective. And then also some of our wet areas have more like meningeal worm and liver fluke and things that drier areas don't have. Avoiding parasite treatments, only treating animals that need treatment. And for us, some people keep those. For us, they leave the system if they need treatment. Using the appropriate class and species of animals in certain situations. Like I wouldn't put the sheep in the silvopasture when it's all brush because the sheep would starve and die. The horses would get all tangled in the treetops that are out there. But the goats are perfect in a silvopasture situation, and they can turn brush into valuable meat for us. Managing the predators. When you have goats just out on the landscape, the predators are like, ha, dinner, until they encounter our guard dogs. And then they decide, maybe I shouldn't. We want to design the system for human ease, for our ease. We don't want to be super stressed in managing it for the health of the animals. And then important, we need to collect data, and we need to use that data to inform our decisions. So we get the results of the decisions that we make, even if we aren't conscious of what those decisions are. Sometimes we do things that we later realize made a big impact on what we kept and what we got rid of. And it takes time to figure that out. My husband always likes to say intervention begets intervention. So if you have to go treat something, you're probably going to have to treat its offspring in the same way. So if we have to treat it, we get rid of it. And then identifying the best in the herd or flock as the breeder animals and keeping stock from those individuals. Our input approach is holistic. Generally, we're looking at it from a systems level. I know a lot of people like the EPDs, but to me that's too reductionist. It doesn't take into account the bigger picture of the creature that's in front of you, and all those data points don't add up to the whole. We can't collect enough data points about the one individual that our eye and our observation can assess about those animals. That's useful, but we take more of a holistic approach. And we do have a different model than what I was taught in 4-H, what I was taught in ruminant nutritional physiology at the University of Wisconsin. It's just very different. We aim for optimal nutrition and matching the animals to the nutrition that's available on our farm. So that's different than what you would see in the NRC and designing diets for a book value goat. We want our animals to have individual choices. So from the consumption of plants in their environment and minerals in their buffet, we want the environment to be diverse. We want to basically create adapted genetics. So we want animals that thrive in our environment, and we want to select for that. We don't want the animals stressed out, so the guard dogs keep the predators away, and we do our best to not stress the animals out. I'm skilled with the full arsenal of treatments. I'm not a veterinarian, so I can't use sedatives and things like that, but I can suture things. I can do rumen fluid transplants. I can do injections and blood draws and hoof trimming and any of that kind of stuff. Any of the assisting in birthing and lactation stuff, I can do all that too. But I'm really happy to not be able to be using those lately. It's just really nice to not have to put any of those skills to test. And then treating and culling. This graph I'll show you again later, but generally a herd of animals has a group in the middle that's your average group, and then on each end are the poor doers and the best performers. And it's usually getting rid of those poor performers and keeping the best ones that you want. So from a selection standpoint, it's really difficult to select for improved genetics if your nutrition isn't figured out. If you're not feeding the animals you have, you can't select for the animals that you want. So you need to be identifying what your animals need for nutrition, providing that, and then if you want those animals to perform better or differently, you need to modify the situation that you're managing them in, their context, and provide the level of treatment that you want or feeding regime that you want to provide, and identify the individuals that do well in those situations, get rid of the ones that still need that either higher level or more intensive type management system. And we assess that primarily by body condition score. So I'm not out there, like I said, doing as many fecal counts and FMACHA as I've done in the past. If they, under my management for browse and winter feeding, if they're maintaining good body condition, we keep them. And if they're losing body condition, they're going to be culled. And so there's all kinds of information out there on how to feel the top line on the left, and then the sternal fat and cartilage. You can grab that between their legs and move it around. If there isn't anything to grab, they're really low body condition, and the fattest ones will be really squishy and floppy up there. This is a chart that I like to show people because when we're grazing goats in the landscape, the forage that they're consuming, goats are very particular in what they eat. They want high quality food, which typically is forages that have readily digestible carbohydrates and protein, plus have good mineral density. So that's why they like the brush better than the grasses. But that digestibility of those forages declines as the forages get mature. And every year, plants go through an early stage of being immature, they become mature, they set seed, and then those plants decline, and then tillers or young leaves come out, and those are more digestible again. So there's this curve of availability of different qualities of forages in their environment. But the more digestible plants are, the higher the passage rate of those plants are through the digestive system, and the more energy they can get out of them. The more lignous those plants are, the slower they pass through the digestive system, the less energy they can get out. And you can starve a goat very easily by giving it too lignous of a food, because if it doesn't have any other choices, it will eat that. It'll have a huge rumen fill, but it'll just lose weight because the quality is too low. And this is something that a lot of, it's typically taught in ruminant nutrition classes, but people aren't taught how to interpret their forage analyses to figure out whether their forage analyses fit what their goats need. And so young goats, growing goats need higher quality forage or more digestible forages than older goats that are in maintenance mode. And so you want to match the metabolic needs of the animal to the forages that you're feeding. if you're grazing grasses or pasture type species, typically when if you're raising kids on pasture or having lactating does on pasture, the 4 to 5 leaf stage is typically where we're at with the goats. It's about where you want to be for finishing beef, steers, and it's high quality, high digestibility. As it gets older, it becomes filling but not growth inducing. From a comparative nutrition standpoint, cattle generally have a lower need for crude protein than sheep, which is also lower than what the goats need. And so the goats are typically targeting these leaves on brushy species because they're high in protein and high in mineral density. And the cattle don't need that protein or that mineral density, and so that's typically the selection differences. The neutral detergent fiber, acid detergent fiber, lignin, and in vitro dry matter digestibility are different for the different species. And so by understanding those differences, we can look at a forage analysis and determine what it's suitable for, what class of livestock it's suitable for. And we can, if we put up our own hay and it's not suitable for our animals, we can sell that and buy hay that is suitable. So generally, we look at the NRC as the guidance for sheep and goat nutrition. The problem is the NRC has good data on sheep, but it has not so great data on goats. So most of the goat data in there, if you read through it carefully, they've extrapolated from sheep data to make the goat diets. And what I've found, it's not consistent for what our animals need. So if we look at what's available in our forages, in our pastures, we can line up the TDN and the crude protein percentages with what our goats need and watch their body condition score to assess if those animals are performing well on those levels. Also, these species of plants that are out there have all kinds of good digestibilities and crude protein percentages. So that's part of why these goats like them. There are some researchers who are doing goat-specific research. So this is a study looking at what does the NRC say in the dotted lines versus what's observed in terms of maternal accretion of minerals and fetus accretion of minerals in goats that are gestating. And so we're learning that the NRC is really off in the recommendations for some of these minerals. Also, looking at all the different, it's hard to see that, but the goat net requirements, the pregnant goat uterus requirements, AFRC, NRC, and SALU in 2004, studying the differences that these systems have for what these animals need. And really there's a lot of variation out there in terms of what is being said as what they need and what they don't need. And I think a lot of that has to do with what type of goats do they have that they're using for these research projects. And are they low input goats or are they high input goats? That makes a huge difference in what they're seeing for the requirements of those animals. Often people ask how does the weight gain occur in these animals, castrated males versus intact males, and how much energy is required to make that amount of gain. And so there's finally some data that's actually goat specific on this out there, and this is one of those studies. And it shows that castrated males need higher energy inputs to reach the same empty body weight. The EBW on the x-axis is empty body weight. So interesting information, and this Isabel Teixeira, and her email and phone is there. She's the researcher for the source of that. And then an easy metric on a forage analysis is one that I use often for our animals, and that's the relative forage quality, RFQ. And that combines the digestible dry matter and the crude protein better than an RFV, a relative feed value, which is more commonly used, I would say, in analyzing feed and forage testing. But I always get an analysis for our forage that includes the RFQ and all of the minerals. So if I wanted to do mineral balancing, I could. But it also shows me, like, if I see the result is from a field that's low in phosphorus, I'm watching, are those animals going and eating more phosphorus out of the mineral bar because they're eating hay that's low in phosphorus? And they do. I've watched that every time we feed anything that's low in phosphorus. And a lot of the other minerals too. But anyway, for us, typically RFQ of 150 is good for our does over winter. They're not lactating anymore, the kids are weaned, they're gonna get bred in the middle of winter. The kids that are growing, we typically feed 170 RFQ. So these are things that you can look for on your forage analysis to tell you how your goats respond to those numbers. Now, your goats might need a higher or lower number, and you can assess that by feeding them that free choice and watching their body condition score. And then you can change it too by identifying the ones that stay fat on that and getting rid of the ones that are skinny on that. So there's all kinds of options. I use this for the horses, for the sheep, for everything. One of the problems with RFV is that it doesn't include digestibility, and so looking at neutral detergent fiber alone is not sufficient to assess quality. We need to look at the digestibility of that fiber. And so here is different types of pasture grasses and percent NDF or percent digestible NDFD. And they can vary, and they're gonna vary over the maturity stages of those plants too. So for my master's degree, I looked at forage preferences for goats, and this is it's like a soil triangle, but it's a forage triangle. So there's browse in the far left with the red axis, forbs is the blue axis, and on the bottom is grasses. And so cattle are typically said to be in that range of primarily grasses and a little bit of forbs. Goats are more on the browse side, the green dot is the goats, and then sheep are closer to cattle, and horses are even more into the grass, heavy dietary preferences. But in the oak savanna restoration work that I did, I followed goats around and recorded everything that they ate for periods of time for a set number of goats every rotation. And so I looked also at forage cover in the places, and I looked at the availability of the plants in the environment versus what the goats ate. And what I found is that in the environment, there was 49% woody vegetation available, 38% forbs, and 13% grass. But then when looking at what the goats ate, they chose 85% of their diet as woody vegetation. They had plenty of forbs and grass to choose from, but they targeted that woody stuff. So that shows you what they want to eat. And so they had 3% of their diet as grass and 12% as forbs. This is way higher in woody component of the diet than what Western research or Southern research has shown about goats. So this is goats applied in the upper Midwest in a brush control situation, and their choices. It's nice to have local research that shows us what these animals can do in a different environment than where goats are more traditionally raised or more numerously raised around this country. And then from that research, I was able to make changes on this chart. So I also was part of a study at that same site looking at Scottish Highland cattle and what they ate. And so the Scottish Highland cattle are the big red dot, and they moved from having where the average cow was consuming more grasses, moved into a lower grass proportion of their diet and a higher browse proportion, just slightly higher forbs. And the goats in this oak savanna restoration, the data from the west and south would have put the goats in that original green dot, but what our goats in the oak savanna were eating put them way on that browse heavy side, and very low in the grass and even lower in forbs what you'd typically see out in the literature. Though that environment provides a diversity that we don't normally see in the forages that are harvested and fed as hay for our animals. So the research has shown now that greater plant diversity results in a higher phytonutrient content of the diet. And those phytonutrients are beneficial health-wise to the animal themselves and to us as consumers of their meat, milk, and any other products from them. So the phytonutrients are plant-produced metabolites. Generally, they're produced to reduce the amount of herbivory or insect damage that the plant encounters. And so they're terpenes, phenols, tocopherols, carotenoids, lots and lots of different phytonutrients, but those are also beneficial to the animal and to us. So there's a direct relationship between the phytonutrients in forage and meat and milk. The green on the far right, dot on the top, is grassland pasture, and the forage polyphenol content is the highest of that versus corn, ryegrass, and grassland hay in terms of milk polyphenol content and the forage polyphenol content. So when you harvest that grassland pasture and store it, it loses some of its qualities. Grazing pasture results in high phytonutrient content of meat and milk for beef, for goats, for the cheese that we make from them. And those compounds are anti-inflammatory, antioxidant. They can be deworming, anthelmintic, lots of benefits of them. So some of the alternative forages are chosen by the animals for health reasons, beyond just the nutrient value of those. And they do contain those plant secondary metabolites. And so some of the plants that we would think of that are common for people to feed to goats, Serratia lespedeza, even though it really doesn't grow up here. We have other Serratia species, or other lespedeza species up here. Chicory and bird's foot trefoil we plant in our pastures. We plant narrowleaf plantain, broadleaf plantain is out there. I've been using wormwood a fair bit lately, and that's been working well. Thyme and rosemary are also plants that grow in this region that we can use that have benefits to the livestock. More information on the various types of shrubbery that's out there that the goats like to eat and the benefits that they provide. If anybody's interested in this presentation, I can send you slides afterward. Just write down my email or contact your organizers, and they can send you my email and I can send you the presentation. But all these plants are excellent source of protein. This is how we typically do mineral buffets. When the minerals are in a barn, we typically have an open lineup of minerals, and these bowl mineral feeders, we split the inside of them so that they contain more slots, and those can sit outside all winter, all summer, get rained on, the minerals stay dry. But they need to have if they're inside, they need a lip over the top so that the goats don't poop in them, pee in them, or run around in the minerals. Okay, diseases. Generally, we want to avoid diseases. You don't want to buy animals that have diseases. Johne's disease is one that is out in the landscape, and the predators, from the research that I did with scavengers and testing tissues of animals, the scavengers are positive for Johne's disease out there. So they're a potential source of that, even if it's not from a herd that you would have gotten a contaminated individual from or gone on their premises and brought it back to your own. So it can be a challenge, but you don't want to bring those in, and if you do get them, call them out and keep working to remove them. CAE is the same way. Generally, healthy animals are less susceptible to diseases. Even if they're exposed, they're not going to get the diseases as readily as animals who are weak in their immune systems, primarily, usually because they have poor nutritional management. And so if you get the nutrition right, then often that will increase their ability to fight off the diseases. And that's where it's tricky, balancing, okay, do I want to be selecting for an animal that needs lower nutritional needs? And how do I do that without them becoming sick from pathogens that are in the environment. Managing diseases, these are, like I said, I'm not going to read through all these for time, but these are different ways that I've managed and know of from reading in other sources how to manage a lot of these conditions differently than what is conventional medicine. So often, like with our antibiotic rules now, trying to get access to antibiotics is difficult, but a lot of the antibiotics can be replaced by vitamin C, injectable vitamin C. So things like that, ideally you wouldn't need to use them because the animals are healthy already, but there are alternative management approaches that don't involve antibiotics or other treatments. To give you a little bit about the egg yolk antibody research that I did, this was something that I had known about before I encountered the poultry science professor that was doing this as a patented approach. I had known about it from the organic dairy management. So typically you raise chickens in an environment where there's animals that have health problems. Chickens put their immune system in the yolks of their eggs to pass their immunity onto their chicks. They don't have colostrum. They pass it on through the yolk of the egg, and the yolk gets absorbed into the chick's belly just before it hatches, and that's where its initial immunity comes from its mother, laid in the egg. And so we can take advantage of the ability of chickens to put antibodies into the eggs. The chickens run around with scouring calves. They're picking up the antigens that are in the manure of these scouring calves. They produce antibodies against those pathogens to make their chicks less susceptible to that pathogen, and then the chick hatches out and isn't susceptible to it. But you can take that egg from those chickens that have been living with those sick calves and feed it to the calf, and it'll cure the scours of the calf. This is just an organic dairy approach to managing pathogens in livestock. And so basically we were doing the same thing, except instead of letting the chickens develop their own antibodies, we were injecting a protein into the chickens that made the chickens produce an antibody against that protein that we injected, which was the patented part of it. And so then we were collecting the eggs, and I was dosing them in a doser to our treatment goats that I had inoculated with parasites that I had raised, that I actually harvested from my own pastures and did copriculture and hatched out a bunch of parasites and orally dosed all these goats with parasites, and then dosed them with this egg that we had created, mixed with molasses, which is why they like, why the goat is like trying to suck it out of my hand there. Unfortunately, the reductionist aspect of this project was too great, and so that protein that we injected in the chickens wasn't sufficient to produce the antibody necessary for the gains that you could see in a typical organic approach, where you just let the chickens scratch through the manure of the animals. So it really didn't work out. But other researchers have done similar approaches with better designed proteins and have gotten results that are closer to what you can get with an organic approach, like I explained. So just different ways of doing things, but again, I mean, I have all these eggs, these yolks frozen in my freezer that I haven't needed lately. It's great. I love having this stuff sitting around and not using it. So we want to manage the conditions. We can provide the opportunity for the animals to manage themselves by putting things out like charcoal or clay or tannins in their environment so that they can manage some of these pathogens, keep the environment clean. Rotational grazing can be helpful, but it's not a full solution. There's information about dietary anion cation balance that the dairy world uses, but the goat world, I really don't, I mean, other than using chloride basically to reduce or to increase acidity in the diet, it's not really well explained to a lot of the goat producers. All right, in the outline here, we're on to parasites. So you're probably very familiar with all the different parasites, external and internal, of goats and where they are in the GI system. Generally, the parasite problem that we're running into is that the parasites themselves are becoming resistant to the dewormers that we have available that are chemicals that we use. But then there's also a lot of misconceptions out there. Like, we don't need to clean out the animals fully. Their immune system actually works better if they have parasites in it. And that keeps the immune system from attacking the host and becoming an autoimmune disease. So parasites actually are beneficial. There are rest periods and life cycles of these parasites, but often they're oversimplified in what I see people sharing on social media, and really bad information being shared because of lack of nuance and lack of understanding of the real cycle and abundance and survivability, especially in our winters here, of some of our parasites. Grass height can be, people are like, oh, you can't, as long as it's 6 to 8 inches tall, it's safe. If it's high humidity, in the tropics, they've measured, they found strongyls meters high in high humidity conditions. These parasites are programmed to go wherever there's humidity, and they just keep climbing. So if you have high humidity conditions, it doesn't matter how tall your grass is, your goats are going to be eating parasites. So the better way to do it is to select for goats that are resistant to parasites, so you don't even have to worry about these things. Heritability of resistance, the goats themselves, there's been research lately on different ways that goats can, and sheep, mainly it's been research in sheep, can control their parasites. And I'll talk about that later. Forage quality, providing sufficient protein. Goats need high protein. That helps with immunoglobulin A content in their blood, which helps with parasite resistance and health of the animal overall, immune function. And a lot of people like to use substitution, so maybe they'll get rid of chemical dewormers, but then they'll be making dosing balls with herbs and spending more money and time making these dosing balls and feeding them to be organic than they would if they were using the chemicals. And they may or may not even work, because you don't know what content of the various plant compounds are in the material that you bought, and you don't know exactly what amount that goat needs. There's no real good guidance on that. So substitution can cause all kinds of problems. Something I mentioned before, parasite infection is normal in goats. We don't want to completely knock out all the goats from all the parasites from the goats. There's definitely losses with parasite infection, and these animals can die very easily if they get overwhelmed with parasites. So our goal is to manage them in a way that they aren't overwhelmed, but also be selecting genetically for the ones that can handle it without all these interventions. Like I said before, it's plant moisture, and these parasites, especially like barber pole worm, they're still there after winter. They're at a high level, and by the dry, hot part of summer, they decline. But at that same time, the does and the kids are dumping more parasites on that same pasture if you're grazing that pasture. So they're re-inoculating the pasture from their GI system. And then in the fall, that curve goes up again. And so basically, there is no safe time during our grazing season with our high humidity, and we don't get more than a handful of days over 100 degrees most of the time during the summer. Haying can certainly dry things out and heat the soil up and kill more parasites, but rotational grazing is not the way to avoid these parasites. We need to just select for animals that are resistant to, or that are able to manage their own parasite load. Plant moisture, I mentioned that before. If you're doing fecal egg counts, I like this guide to fecal egg identification, and have used that a lot. It's really nice. The colors aren't that vibrant under the scope, but it's close. And the shapes and textures are nice in this. I've had lots of experience with meningeal worm and liver flukes, and I have my own meningeal worm treatment, basically using a horse dewormer that works well. It's not organic, but it will recover a goat from meningeal worm within 24 to 48 hours. So liver flukes, once we put the mineral bar in place, we've not had livers rejected at slaughter for flukes, even though we have lots of deer in our wet environment. From a worm perspective, we're looking at how tolerant these animals are to their parasites. And Susan Schoenen put together a 5-point check, and I usually expand that for goats to a 6-point check because I wanted to see all of these things plus unusual behavior. If the animal I'm assessing, is the animal hanging out by itself? Is it not acting like it normally should be? To me, that's a really significant indicator of an animal that's being negatively affected by its parasites. And like I said, we want them to have parasites. We just don't want there to be a negative economic aspect to the parasite infection. There are alternative dewormers out there. We can't grow Lespedeza like this here, but I mean, research was done feeding sheep wine, basically dosing wine to sheep, and the tannins in the wine control parasites. So copper oxide wire particles can work too. We just have a copper mineral source in our buffet. We don't do any copper oxide wire particle dosing or anything. There are organic dewormers, and there's lots of, even though the universities don't typically teach this, there's lots of citations in the literature on organic dewormers. The problem is plants always have different amounts of these chemicals in their tissues, and it's based on the stress and the environment that they're in. There are Midwestern plants that contain dewormers and that are plant secondary metabolites, the PSM. So some plants contain tannins, terpenoids, saponins, caffeic acid. These are plants that are common out there, and even though a lot of them are weeds, the goats will eat some of them to manage their own parasite levels. Mixed species grazing helps reduce pasture contamination. These are some hare rams, or some hare rams, Corsican hare rams, and some of our bucks living with our stallions at that sandy property in Sauk. All right, genetic selection. There is host and parasite sources of genetic variability, and we can select for individuals like in the C category where the host health is on the x-axis and the infection intensity of the parasites is on the x-axis. And you'll see the host genotype in the blue that's circled in that red box. Despite the infection intensity, it's maintaining the same level of host health. What we don't want are the goats that, as intensity increases of the infection, their health declines. We don't want goats like that. But there's also breed differences, and I would argue that, so this is research done in sheep, but I would argue that there's a lot of parallels in goats, and it hasn't been done in goats yet, but I bet once it has been done, it'll be very similar results. And that's looking at Texels, Suffolk, St. Croix, and Katahdin sheep, and their mechanism of keeping a low fecal egg count. So the animals that have been raised in environments that are wet, like our Kikos, or places where, like the St. Croix in a wet environment year-round, have parasite attacking them year-round. So they have a mechanism of defense where they don't even allow the parasite to embed in their mucosal membranes in their GI system. But you compare that to something like the Texel, which is more of a hill breed, has winters, more like, I would compare that to more like a boar goat, where instead of winters, they have dry, really hot summers that wipe the parasites out for a period of the growing season, or for part of that animal's life. And when there aren't parasite challenges, the animal doesn't have to work so hard during that time to fight off those parasites. So they have a different mechanism of managing their parasites. They allow it to embed, but then they reduce its ability to put out so many eggs. If their immune system is working, they reduce the egg shedding of the parasites that are embedded in them. So I would bet that our Kikos are much more like these St. Croix, where they were developed in an environment where there's constant parasite pressure, and so they have the ability to just prevent the parasites from embedding in the first place. And the thing is, if we don't continue selecting for that, we can lose it. So that's why on our farm, we intentionally continually expose them to parasites. And even during the winter, when it does get wet and warms up a bit, some of those parasites will be present again. When we're looking at genetic selection, rarely are there simple traits. There are some things like polled genetics versus horn genetics that are a gene that's easy to select for. But most of them are polygenetic. There are multiple genes involved. And we can look at our herd for all of these things like metabolic efficiency, parasites, hooves, temperament, look at the individuals from one range of the herd, the middle of the herd, and then the other range of the herd, the good ones, the bad ones, and the stuff in between. And based on what our selection criteria is, we can focus on selecting from the best ones to produce more and move that curve basically up into better production. And the EPDs can be useful in some of these situations, but what we prefer to do is look at the animals and make just a visual assessment, make our group, our ear tag numbers of animals that we like the looks of them, and then we go look at numbers. And we choose the ones that have the right numbers for our goals, rather than going off the numbers first and then going and looking at them. And what you may find is that those are not the ones that are going to do well. So identifying what you want and going for that, but not focusing on single trait. Like, you don't want to completely focus on one trait and disregard all the other traits. That's why it's good to do the visual assessment first, because you're looking at the whole of the individual and choosing those first, and then looking at their numbers. Genetic conditions to avoid. Obviously, they can't eat if they have underbite or overbite. The Kiko lists are just full of discussions on selection criteria, and lots of those are good. I mean, they're doing a good job of identifying these issues and selecting against them. How we select for desired traits. So this is just to give you our approach. So we identify what we're looking for, set up the environment. So like for the parasite susceptibility with our animals, we will put them in an environment that challenges them. If we want nutritional animals that are more efficient on feed, we give them lower quality feed and watch their body condition scores. The ones that keep a good body condition score, we keep. The ones that lose body condition score, we put on higher quality food, and we don't use their offspring for keeping as replacements. So we induce the challenge or the change that we want, and we watch the response. Mostly we're watching body condition and behavior. They will, if they're stressed and low body condition, they're going to be more susceptible to parasites and health problems. So they typically identify themselves pretty quickly. And if you are watching close enough, you can recover the ones that are not doing well. And so you aren't losing your shirt in a financial perspective with those ones that are not what you want to use for breeding. So you select the offspring that are from those good ones, and you just keep working in that direction. But don't try and you can't do everything at once, and you shouldn't just only select on one criteria. And then I gave the example of the parasite tolerance or resistance here. We have a genetic selection process for our doelings, and we do the same thing for our bucklings. It takes a while. It takes 5 years or so, 4 years for the does and 5 years for the bucks, for us to determine if those animals are quality enough for us to really retain a bunch of their offspring. And then after we've determined their quality, then we keep a lot of their offspring. But until then, we're always testing. So every year is full of testing and culling and assessing. And we do the same thing for the bucklings. And we didn't start with great goats. We started with what we could find, and we bred up from there. And every year we learn new things, and we buy typically we're buying bucks that we want to add their genetics into our system and see what happens. There's no guarantees. The EPDs can be useful, but since our herd doesn't have EPDs, we don't know whether those EPDs are better or worse than what our herd is doing, and whether it's going to take it down or up. We have no idea until we do it. So we just keep testing things. We're always looking for other farms that have similar selection criteria as we have, and we're typically buying goats from them and seeing how they do. It's just, I don't know, it's been almost a couple decades now, and just always learning new stuff. So finding those producers that are doing the kind of stuff that you want to do is what I would suggest is the best way to move forward with your goals. All right, a little bit about predators, because after you've made all this genetic selection, you don't want to lose it to stupid predators. So fencing, we use woven wire, but this type of woven wire sucks for yearlings and kids because they're little tiny horns they can get their head through, but then they're too stupid to get their head back out. So every day we drive around our silvopasture and pull stupid stuck goats out of the fencing, which is a summer task, but it's always, I mean, it's a good way. It makes us get out there every day and go look at the herd and find out what's going on. The next fence we put in won't have such small holes. Electronet we use a lot for our brake fences and our grazing systems, but not in the silvopasture. So electronet can, if it's moved every 2 weeks, keep predators out like coyotes. Coyotes are not affected by flattery, which can be temporarily useful against wolves. Flattery is these red flags that hang down from the electric wire. They've now made electrified flattery, so that flag has electric on it, so when the animals touch that, they get zapped. You can train the local predators by hanging a piece of meat over an electrified line, and they come to eat the meat and get zapped. So it trains them to stay away from your fences. But they're really, livestock guard dogs are the best way to go. They're always out there. They're always working. Ours cost us like between $200 and $300 per dog per year in terms of food, and ours basically don't need much at all. They eat the goat poop and they get dewormed with as much copper as is in the goat poop. We found that putting wormwood in their water keeps the ticks off of them, so we don't have to use anything for tick control, and does the same thing for heartworm. So our dogs are really inexpensive. It's basically their food. And that's less than the value of the loss of one goat. So they're definitely worth their weight in gold. We've had donkeys, and I've used one llama in the past. The problem is with donkeys, they are founder susceptible, and on the diet that is good for the goats, often it's too rich for donkeys. So they'll get too fat, like you can see this crusty neck on this donkey here. They like it out there, but it's just not good for them. And trimming hooves and dealing with donkey attitude is challenging. The llamas are susceptible to meningeal worm. And I did save one llama from meningeal worm using the same treatment I use on the goats. So that does work. And hunting and trapping, there's a lot of people that like to do that. I'm certified by Wisconsin DNR for hunting and trapping, been through the training courses and that sort of thing. And as part of my wildlife ecology education, I enjoy doing that sort of thing. I don't have the time for it, and I don't want to, because having a stable predator population out there reduces predation on our livestock. And coyotes especially, if you reduce their population number through trapping and shooting, they compensate by having bigger litters of puppies, which all survive. So within a year and a half of you depopulating, they will be back up to or even higher in population than they were before you shot or trapped them out. And those young ones are dumb. The old ones are trained to your dogs and your fences, and they stay away from your goats. But the young coyote pups that still haven't figured the system out try all kinds of stuff, and you're more likely to have injuries to animals if you have a young and unstable population than if you have a mature and stable population. All right, resources. I have a big library of books in my house because I buy all kinds of books that have information that I didn't get in my formal education. And so I have all kinds of organic and holistic and stuff that wasn't taught, but then I have the NRC, I have typical livestock production, sheep production, goat production type books. All of that together gives us tools and ideas about how to manage our animals. And that's what I've used to develop what we do, which is taking a systemic approach to our management to reduce inputs, to increase profitability. We found that really feeding, even though we're concerned about parasites and reproductive ability, if they aren't fed right for what they need, none of that's worth selecting for. We always have to be feeding them correctly for what they need. Avoiding and minimizing diseases and parasites, selecting for healthy animals that are highly productive, and then managing that health in our system. That's what we do here. And if you have any questions, we have just at time here for what I was given for my allocation, but I'll be here the rest of the day, so you can hunt me down and ask questions. Also, you can send me an email or phone or message me on Facebook. I have 2 Facebook profiles under Cherrie Nolden. One of them is for my board position on the Norwegian Fjord Horse Registry, and it has me on a horse. So you don't need to follow that page. Follow the one that has the Kiko goat on it. Any questions here initially? Yes? Breed of livestock guardian dogs. We have used every breed and mix out there, just not with any mixes with herding dogs or pet dogs or anything. I've had one good Pyrenees that didn't wander and wasn't barky. I don't like the hair coats on the Pyrenees. They get hot spots and they don't shed out really well. And we have so much burdock that I like dogs that have a shorter hair coat. So the dogs we've had more success with were like Bulgarian Karakachans. They're a breed that is a harder type of dog that's willing to take on predators, and they also stick close to their livestock, so they're not going to chase a predator halfway across the countryside and get shot by a neighbor because the dog is wandering on their property or chasing deer or whatever people think that it's doing. So those, and they also are good against wolves and bears and mountain lions, which are not in our area yet but are moving in. So that's a breed that I like for their hardness. But they're also not going to be like a Pyrenees that is happy to visit every stranger that shows up in your yard. So I like all of our fences on our property are set up so that people can drive in our driveway and come up to the house without encountering any of our guard dogs. The herding dogs are there in the yard, but they're friendly and they're not going to bite people or try and exclude them or keep them in their car, which is what a lot of the dogs would do to strangers if we weren't there to let the dog know that it's okay. So, I mean, we've had Maremma, we've had Tatra, Spanish Mastiff. We just bought a Central Asian Shepherd, Spanish Mastiff, Maremma Cross. There's a lot of good mixed breed LGDs out there, as long as people are using their parent dogs as working dogs and not just breeding them to breed them. And then selecting the temperament that you want out of the litter and having a breeder be able to identify which individuals in the litter have different temperaments is really important. And I don't like barky dogs. I don't like long hair coats. They do need to have enough insulation for winter to live outside all winter at our place. We have common doors too. We have 3 common doors now, and they grow dreadlocks, and we shave them off every year. When we shear the sheep, we shear the dogs. So I was skeptical with all the burdock that we have in our environment that those common doors would be good, but if you shear them in the spring, they will accumulate burdock in the fall when the burdock seeds are set. But that actually kind of helps make their coat better insulating during the winter. And they don't have the dreadlocks that separate their hair and let the cold air get down to their skin. So they've done just fine. And as long as we shear them once a year, we don't need to comb them or do anything else. I don't like high input type dogs, just like I don't like high input type sheep or goats or anything else. Other questions? All right, well, feel free to find me throughout the rest of today, and interested to see the goats going through the sale today.